Hi, people. This is Aidan Jonah, managing editor of the Canada Files here, and I am speaking today with Ali Rougeot. Ali, can you introduce yourself and tell people a bit about you?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ali. I'm a student at the University of Toronto, and I'm the coordinator of Fridays for Future Toronto.
Okay, so obviously the big news with the COVID-19 pandemic that's happened right now, it's obviously crucial that everyone takes seriously that we do physical distancing. And so in light of that, there's been some news around the climate strike that was supposed to be coming up on April 3rd. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So April 3rd was supposed to be kind of our big global climate strike, just like September was. But because of COVID-19, we were forced to cancel the in-person strike that was going to be happening next week. So instead we decided, and we're the only city in Canada so far that's doing it, to have an online digital strike, which changes a lot of the different settings, goals, but it's still going to be a moment on Friday where we're going to come together as a community to talk about the climate crisis.
Okay. All right. So what is the general plan? Like, how are you going to do this in a way that makes it impactful?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing we're sure of is that it's not going to have the same impact. It doesn't mean it's going to have less of an impact, but the goals are different. So when you take the street, you try to take up space in the streets, kind of slow down the city, make sure people can see your action. You try to put pressure on governments. This is going to be very different. It's going to be much more about making people keep the climate crisis on the agenda. It's going to be about having people do actions from home. So we're going to be telling people like, okay, now we're all going to mass email together. We're all going to post this thing on social media together to get this trending. So we're going to be doing more of these actions. And another goal is also giving people hope and an understanding of how to interpret the COVID situation in light of the climate situation. So why would a Green New Deal apply to both? Questions like this. And so the goals are much more on education, awareness, community, compared to, like being very loud and disturbing like we might have been in September.
All right. So that is all great there. So, do you think this potentially actually might open up a potential climate strike to more people, given the online nature of the event?
It definitely has an accessibility component, right? So people don't have to be in a big crowd. They don't have to be confronted to the police for people of color or Indigenous people. They don't have to be, in the streets or taking time off work if people are working remotely. Um, we're also going to have things like ASL interpretation. So hopefully it's not going to take away anything that we had before in our strikes. The one thing is that it may be harder for people with young kids, for example, to kind of feel like they're participating. I'm thinking no kid is going to sit through a conference call, even though we have musicians and like young musicians as well. I don't know how that's going to go. So that might be a bit of a downside, but I'm thinking it might have a bigger impact, and maybe people from further away than the GTA might join. Hopefully that's going to be the positive sides.
So, talking about climate movements and online efforts, what are your thoughts on polluters out? I heard they recently launched and been making some waves.
Yeah, I have very much like only superficial information on the Polluters Out campaign. I just know personally some of the activists involved. Obviously, in principle, we're very much aligned with all of that, and the fact that it's I know a few at least of the voices are Indigenous is something we really really support. But yeah, I don't have more details than you would have on the specifics. I do like that we're having more and more different campaigns tackling each aspect of the climate crisis, so that we're constantly nagging at the forces in power, and it's not just the Fridays for Future movement, but it's from all those angles. I find that very cool and very hopeful.
All right, that's great. Shifting to the news of the day. Obviously, there was reports coming out, and we covered it on the site actually, that Trans Mountain pipeline expansion is still continuing. And can you just give us thoughts on that? And frankly, about how the COVID-19 has potentially limited resistance there.
Yeah, my first reaction to seeing that construction kept going was almost that it was a cowardly thing to do. First of all, it's putting workers out there when we're trying as much as possible to limit that. It's also, I always kind of find it, for some reason I found it unfair, but I maybe shouldn't be surprised that it's unfair that we were respecting and no longer protesting these things because of the requirements of the government not to gather and protest yet. The things we're protesting are still going through, so it kind of feels like, is it using these emergency powers or using these new powers to pass things that otherwise would have had social uprising? I don't know. So my initial reaction was kind of like, this doesn't sound fair. Another one is I find it ridiculous in the midst of a climate crisis and a crash of oil prices to keep, they're basically just trying to keep the business as usual, regardless of the fact that we're proving live right now that business as usual is failing. So it's also doesn't sound very financially sound, to be honest.
Yeah, talking about business as usual in the oil industry, I'd obviously like to get your thoughts on the oil and gas multi-billion-dollar bailout that the federal government seems to be preparing.
Yeah, honestly, I could have predicted that. I really, like, we knew. I was talking about that with my dad, actually, and he definitely said that it was going to happen. We're not surprised. It's in line with past actions. Apart from the fact that it's in line with what they did, it's a shame. It's very much a shame when you have kind of an opportunity to maybe nationalize those industries and slowly make them go to rest. Instead of that, you're going to maybe consolidate their corporate power and just spend taxpayer money on those industries. So it does seem like it's, once again, a missed opportunity from a government that announced their commitments to youth in the climate crisis and are not acting accordingly.
Yeah, it really does seem like smoke and mirrors. But you know what? I don't think I have any more questions there. It's actually been great to chat with you. I really appreciate you taking the time for this. And I honestly wish you luck in the efforts and the upcoming climate strike.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions.
No problem. It was great to talk with you. All right, see you.